Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Glad to be here for this one, honestly, because we are getting into some really heavy, fascinating stuff today.
Yeah, we really are. So I want you to imagine a Fortune 500 company, right? But the CEO refuses to look at the balance sheets.
Which is always a great start.
Right. He is spending his days on mindfulness retreats while the company literally burns to the ground. And meanwhile, the aggressive new VP of sales is staging this slow-motion takeover.
Oh, and the corrupt board members are scheming to just carve up all the assets behind the scenes.
Exactly. And on top of all that, the company's competitors are funding a massive disinformation campaign to tank the stock.
It sounds like a total nightmare.
It is. And the COO, the one highly competent, honest executive who is desperately trying to keep the entire enterprise afloat, well, he is currently being framed for corporate treason by his own colleagues.
Wow. Yeah, that is a toxic workplace right there.
It really is. But the crazy thing is, this isn't a modern political thriller or some headline from the business pages today. We are actually stepping into the incredibly volatile cutthroat world of William Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 2.
Yeah, a text that is, 400 years old now?
Roughly, yeah. We have this play on the table today alongside the brilliant razor-sharp commentary of the 19th century literary critic William Hazlitt.
And Hazlitt's insights are just incredible here.
They really are. And what we are looking at is basically a masterclass in how power vacuums destroy organizations, how political factionalism breeds violence, and honestly, how the tragedy of ineffective goodness can be more destructive than outright malice.
I mean, Hazlitt actually has the perfect phrase for this specific environment. In his commentary, he refers to this period in English history as a perfect bear garden.
A bear garden. That paints quite a picture.
Right. It just means it is chaotic, it is brutal, and it is completely defined by a lack of central unifying authority. We are standing on the very brink of the Wars of the Roses here.
The ultimate civil war.
Exactly. And to truly grasp the mechanics of this chaos, I think we have to look at the geopolitical disaster that sets the entire plot into motion.
Which is the marriage of King Henry VI.
Yeah, the marriage, it is a total disaster.
It is the ultimate failed merger if we stick to that corporate analogy, because when the curtain rises, King Henry is young, he is exceptionally pious, and he is just fundamentally uninterested in the mechanics of ruling.
He really doesn't want the job.
He doesn't. And his proxy, the Duke of Suffolk, has just returned from France, having negotiated Henry's marriage to Margaret of Anjou.
Now, in a typical royal marriage of this era, the bride is supposed to bring a massive dowry.
Right. We are talking wealth, land, vital military alliances. It was basically statecraft by matrimony.
But Suffolk completely inverts that paradigm. He negotiates a marriage where King Henry actually gives away territories.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. Henry surrenders the hard-won French territories of Anjou and Maine to Margaret's father, simply for the privilege of marrying her.
Wait, and he doesn't get a single coin in dowry in return?
Not a single coin. He gave away the farm for free.
That is absolutely staggering when you consider the historical context. I mean, these are territories that Henry's father, Henry V, bled for. Thousands of Englishmen died to secure that foothold in France.
Yeah, it was a generational war effort just handed over.
Right. And when Gloucester, who is the king's uncle and the Lord Protector, when he reads the peace treaty aloud to the court, he literally drops the paper on the floor in shock.
He has a physical, visceral reaction to it.
He does. He says, "A sudden qualm hath struck me at the heart." He just cannot process the fact that they are just handing over the fruits of all this bloodshed.
Well, and that dropped piece of paper, it really symbolizes the dropping of all national stability.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because Suffolk didn't negotiate this disastrous treaty out of incompetence, He negotiated it out of staggering ambition.
He knew exactly what he was doing.
Exactly. Suffolk knows that Henry is weak. He knows he is easily manipulated. So by bringing over a queen who owes her entire position to him, Suffolk intends to rule the king through Margaret.
Wow, so he is setting up his own puppet regime.
That's the plan. And nature, as they say, abhors a vacuum. Because Henry refuses to project strength, this massive power vacuum opens up at the highest level of government.
And a highly toxic coalition of schemers steps right in to fill it.
Yeah, they really do.
Let's map out that coalition for a second, because it functions exactly like a predatory board of directors.
Definitely. Who do we have?
Well, first you have Queen Margaret, who arrives in England and immediately realizes her husband is a political lightweight, so she begins consolidating power for herself.
Right, she wastes no time.
Then you have Cardinal Beaufort, the king's great-uncle. He is immensely wealthy, entirely corrupt, and essentially using the church as a shield for his political maneuvers.
A classic corrupt insider.
Totally. Then you have Suffolk, who we mentioned, who is dangerously close to the Queen. And finally, you have the Dukes of Somerset and Buckingham, who are purely opportunistic.
Just looking out for themselves.
Exactly. And all of them, despite their own internal rivalries, are united by one immediate singular goal.
The absolute destruction of the good Duke Humphrey of Gloucester.
Right. Gloucester is the Lord Protector. He is essentially the last honest man in the government.
He is the COO, from your analogy, the guy actually trying to keep the company running according to the rule of law.
Yes, exactly. He is the main impediment to all their corruption. But while they are actively plotting Gloucester's downfall, there is another figure playing an entirely different game in the background.
Oh, you mean the Duke of York? Richard Plantagenet?
Yes, the patient usurper. I find him so fascinating.
He is terrifyingly patient. He secretly believes he is the rightful heir to the throne, but he doesn't make a frontal assault. He just watches the Lancastrians, that's Henry's faction. He watches them tear each other apart.
He actually has this moment where he tells himself to wink at the Duke of Suffolk's insolence. He is saying, I'm just going to wait until they have snared the shepherd of the flock.
Meaning Gloucester?
Right, that virtuous prince, the good Duke Humphrey. York is doing the political calculus here.
He is saying, let the corrupt insiders take out the one competent defender of the king. And once the king is unprotected, I will swoop in and take the crown.
It is chillingly calculated.
It really is. And the underlying architecture of this entire conflict asks a profound question about human organization, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, what happens to a community, to a workplace, or to a nation when the person at the top refuses to wield their authority?
Right. When they just tap out.
Yeah. When a leader abdicates their responsibility, they don't create peace. They create a vacuum. And the most ruthless, self-serving actors will inevitably rush in to fill it.
Which brings us to what I think is the most transformative and, frankly, the most difficult insight in the entire play.
The tragedy of ineffective goodness.
Yes. It is this realization that personal virtue, being a good, kind, spiritual person, if it doesn't come with the courage, the competence, or the willingness to enforce that goodness, it is actively dangerous to the people around you.
Hazlitt's commentary is vital here because he unpacks Henry's character with incredible precision.
What does he say about him?
Well, he points out that Henry is not a bad man in the malicious sense. He is deeply religious. He wants a clean conscience above all else.
Which sounds like a good thing, normally.
Right. But his piety is entirely self-serving. For instance, when Somerset arrives with the devastating news that all the remaining territories in France have been completely lost, Henry's response is just, cold news, Lord Somerset, but God's will be done.
Oh, wow. You can almost hear the collective groan of the nobles in the room.
Yeah, York is practically hyperventilating in the corner because this ruins his own future inheritance.
Henry is basically using his theology as a shield against having to take executive action. He spiritualizes his own incompetence.
That is exactly what he does. And Queen Margaret sees right through it and she utterly despises him for it.
She does. She complains to Suffolk that she thought she was marrying a courageous leader, but instead, Henry's mind is bent to holiness.
She says he'd rather number Ave Maries on his beads.
Yeah, she mocks him. She says his study is his tilt yard. His battlefield is just his library of religious books. She even suggests the College of Cardinals should elect him pope and take him to Rome.
Because he acts way more like a pontiff than a king.
Right. But the cost of that weakness isn't just that people laugh at him behind his back. The cost is actually paid in blood.
Because Henry refuses to manage his unruly nobles, Gloucester is left completely exposed.
Yes, the faction led by Suffolk, Margaret, and the Cardinal successfully orchestrate this huge plot to have Gloucester arrested for high treason on completely fabricated charges.
And the craziest part is, Henry knows the charges are fake. He explicitly states it to the Parliament.
He does. He says his conscience tells him Gloucester is as innocent as a sucking lamb or a harmless dove.
He knows it, but he does absolutely nothing to stop it.
He weeps. He tells the court his heart is drowned with grief, and then he turns around and walks out of the room, leaving Gloucester in the hands of his sworn enemies.
He just abdicates his role as the ultimate judge and protector of his people.
And the result is that Gloucester is murdered in his bed by assassins hired by Suffolk. Henry's tears, his profound sadness, his personal goodness. I mean, none of it saves the life of his most loyal servant.
The scene where Henry faints upon hearing of Gloucester's death is a masterstroke of psychological realism by Shakespeare. Henry is genuinely devastated, but his devastation is useless.
Okay, I have to push back on this heavily for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let me argue the other side of this, because I think there is a modern bias against Henry that we really need to interrogate. Isn't it incredibly cynical to blame Henry for the actions of literal murderers?
Well, he is the king.
Right, but shouldn't we as a society want leaders who are peaceful? We are talking about a historical period defined by warlords and endless bloodshed. Henry genuinely hates violence. He prioritizes spiritual goodness over ruthless ambition.
That is true. He doesn't want to hurt anyone.
So why are we condemning the one guy in the play who isn't trying to actively assassinate his coworkers? Isn't Henry just a genuinely good guy trapped in a completely corrupted system?
That is a compelling defense, I admit. But I think it requires us to blur the lines between private morality and public duty.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In a private citizen's life, turning the other cheek, avoiding conflict, and prioritizing inner peace might be the mark of profound spiritual maturity.
Sure.
But when you accept the mantle of leadership, when the safety, the livelihoods, and the physical well-being of others depend entirely on your authority, pacifism in the face of active evil is actually a dereliction of duty.
I see.
Hazlitt zeroes in on this. He describes Henry's weakness as the effeminacy of an indolent, good-natured mind that is naturally averse to the turmoils of ambition.
An indolent, good-natured mind.
Right. Henry wants to keep his hands clean. He wants to feel righteous. But by refusing to engage in the messy, difficult, confrontational reality of statecraft, he allows wolves to devour the sheep.
So the argument is that true leadership requires the moral courage to fight for the good, not just passively embody it in your own personal life.
Precisely. If you are the king, your job is not to be the most spiritual person in the room. Your job is to wield the sword of justice to protect the innocent.
And he fails to do that.
Spectacularly. When Henry abandons Gloucester to preserve his own sense of peace, his goodness becomes a vanity project. The text forces us to recognize that incompetence in a leader, even if entirely well-meaning, yields the exact same horrific results as outright malice.
Because the bodies still pile up either way.
Exactly, the bodies still pile up.
That is such a heavy realization. You can't just be good. You have to be strong enough to defend the good. Otherwise, you aren't actually keeping the peace. You are just outsourcing the violence to the bullies.
That's a perfect way to phrase it, outsourcing the violence.
And if we pull the thread on how the nobles actually take Gloucester down, we hit on something that feels incredibly contemporary.
Oh, the smear campaign.
Yes. When we look at how the coalition unites against Gloucester, it is a masterclass in toxic organizational behavior. Gloucester is highly competent and principled. And in the modern workplace, we see this dynamic constantly.
Where highly competent individuals are targeted.
Yes. They are targeted not because they're failing, but because their integrity and their work ethic hold up a mirror to the insecurity and ambition of their colleagues.
Yeah, they basically make the rest of the C-suite look bad just by doing their jobs effectively.
Exactly. And the tactical approach the nobles use here is fascinating. They don't initially attack Gloucester's work performance because his record is flawless.
Right. He is managing the treasury well. He respects the law. He is beloved by the common people.
They literally cannot beat him on the merits. So what do? They look for a vulnerability adjacent to him, and they find it in his wife, Eleanor, the Duchess of Gloucester.
Eleanor is such a great character. She is incredibly ambitious, perhaps a bit naive, and she has this massive, very public rivalry with Queen Margaret.
Oh yeah, they are constantly trying to outdress and outstatus each other at court.
And the schemers, specifically Suffolk and Buckingham, they recognize Eleanor's ambition as the chink in Gloucester's armor. They essentially set a trap for her.
What kind of trap?
Well, they know Eleanor has been dabbling with astrologers and priests, so they facilitate a scenario where she consults a witch named Marjorie Jorgain to summon a spirit and ask questions about the king's future.
Which, in the 15th century, isn't just a quirky hobby. It is absolute, unequivocal high treason. Plotting the king's death through the occult was a capital offense.
Right. So Buckingham and his guards burst in, catch them in the act of the seance, and arrest everyone.
Wow.
Eleanor is publicly shamed. She is forced to walk the streets of London barefoot, wrapped in a white sheet carrying a candle, while the crowds mock her.
That is brutal.
And then she is banished. This completely breaks Gloucester's political power. The nobles use the scandal of the wife to politically cripple the husband, stripping him of his allies and setting him up for the final fabricated treason charges.
It is literally the prototype of the modern smear campaign. If you can't beat someone in the boardroom or at the ballot box, you dig into their personal life.
Yep, find a weak spot.
You find a weak spot, you manufacture a scandal, you feed it to the gossip mill, and you let the court of public opinion do the dirty work. We see this in corporate takeovers, we see it in local politics, we see it on social media every single day.
It serves as a stark warning, really. Competence and integrity are not an impenetrable shield. In a corrupt system, they actually paint a target on your back.
And Gloucester mistakenly believed that his innocence would protect him. He trusted the system to function correctly.
Which was his fatal flaw.
And speaking of the court of public opinion, that weaponization of public perception leads us directly into another dynamic that feels like it was ripped straight from today's headlines.
The astroturfed movements.
Yes. The manufacturing of fake news and populist outrage. The Jack Cade rebellion in Act 4 is arguably the most terrifying and recognizable sequence in the entire play.
It is so intense. To understand the Jack Cade rebellion, we have to look back at the Duke of York's master plan.
Right. York wants the throne.
York wants to seize the throne, but he needs to test the waters first. He needs to see how strong the king's military forces actually are and how the public will react to a challenge to Lancastrian rule.
But he doesn't want to risk his own neck doing it.
Exactly. If the rebellion fails, he needs plausible deniability. So he secretly funds and encourages this man named Jack Cade to start a massive, violent uprising in Kent.
York's description of Cade is amazing, by the way. He calls him a shag-haired, crafty kern and a sharp-quilled porpentine.
Which is such vivid language.
It is. He essentially says, I've seen this guy fight. He is wildly aggressive. He is totally fearless. And I'm going to throw him like a grenade at the government and see what happens.
So Cade changes his name, claims he's actually Lord Mortimer, and therefore asserts he is the rightful heir to the throne.
He just makes it up out of whole cloth.
Yep. He gathers what the royal messenger calls a ragged multitude of peasants and workers, and they march on London.
It operates exactly like a modern viral disinformation campaign or a highly coordinated internet troll army.
It really does.
Cade relies on pure, aggressive, anti-intellectualism and promises of impossible economic miracles.
Right. He tells the crowd that under his rule, 7 halfpenny loaves will be sold for a penny.
He says he will make it a felony to drink small beer.
He says all the realms shall be in common, and his apparel shall be provided at the state's expense.
It's utopian nonsense designed to whip the crowd into a frenzy, and then, terrifyingly, the rhetoric turns incredibly dark.
Yeah, the violence is specifically targeted at the educated and the administrative class.
The people who actually know how things run.
Right. The mob brings a clerk before Cade, and the clerk's only crime is that he can write his own name instead of using a wax seal.
Just basic literacy.
Just being literate. Cade declares him a villain and a traitor, and the crowd cheers as Cade orders him to be hanged with his pen and inkhorn around his neck.
It is chilling. And later they capture Lord Say, the treasurer of England. And Cade justifies executing him with this surreal, terrifying speech.
What does he say again?
He says, "Thou hast most traitorously corrupted the youth of the realm in erecting a grammar school."
Wow. Erecting a grammar school is treason.
Yeah. He accuses him of surrounding himself with people who talk about nouns and verbs and of installing printing presses. It is the ultimate weaponization of ignorance. Cade equates literacy and administrative competence with oppression.
Shakespeare is directly challenging our modern era of information overload and populism here, I think.
How so?
Well, he is showing us how legitimate working-class grievances, like the real economic frustrations of the commons, can be easily hijacked.
Ah, right.
York doesn't care about Jack Cade, and he certainly doesn't care about the peasants of Kent. York is an elite who is using their genuine anger for his own cynical career advancement. He is astroturfing a rebellion.
So when we see massive waves of public outrage today, whether it is a viral hashtag, a culture war controversy, or physical unrest, this text really begs us to look past the crowd and ask some hard questions.
Like, who is the Duke of York in this scenario?
Exactly. Who is sitting safely in a corporate boardroom or a political office or a media conglomerate, watching the chaos and quietly benefiting from the destabilization?
It is a profound study in the mechanics of demagoguery. When people feel unheard and economically stressed, they become highly susceptible to anyone who points a finger and offers an easy scapegoat.
Whether that scapegoat is a noble who speaks French, a clerk who can write, Or a modern equivalent, the dynamic is identical.
The real takeaway here is learning to recognize when your own righteous anger is being manipulated by someone else's hidden agenda. It's about retaining your individual critical thinking when the crowd starts chanting.
And that brings us to a crucial friction point, because we really have to confront the uncomfortable truths in this text. Modern listeners often resist these ideas instinctively.
Because we like our history neat and our morality simple.
We do, and the depiction of the commons as a violent, fickle mob directly challenges modern democratic idealism. We prefer to view the people as inherently wise, possessing this noble collective intuition.
But Shakespeare doesn't seem to buy that.
No, Shakespeare seems to take a highly elitist view, suggesting the masses are just a mindless beast waiting to tear down their own society.
We do have to navigate this carefully. The play certainly features rhetoric that sounds highly elitist to our ears today.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when the rebels arrive, the nobles refer to them as filth and scum, base peasants, and a ragged multitude.
Yep.
It is not a shining endorsement of grassroots democracy.
Right. If you take it at face value, it reads like anti-democratic propaganda.
However, we don't need to adopt a 16th century aristocratic disdain for the working class to extract the value here.
Okay, so what is the enduring value then?
The enduring lesson isn't a blanket condemnation of the working class. It is a brilliant, terrifying psychological study of crowd dynamics. Shakespeare understands that a mob does not operate with the collective intelligence of its members.
That's a great point.
It operates on the lowest common denominator of its loudest voices. The mob in Henry VI is a warning about what happens when institutional trust collapses completely.
Because when the justice system fails, when good men like Gloucester are murdered by the state, the public naturally loses faith in the social contract.
Exactly. And that creates fertile ground for Jack Cade to take root.
Which loops right back to the culpability of the nice guy. The first uncomfortable truth is that Henry's passivity caused this. If Henry had been a strong, just king, York wouldn't have been able to leverage the public's anger in the first place.
Because there wouldn't have been a power vacuum.
Right. But modern culture has a tendency to give a pass to people who mean well. We judge leaders by their intentions rather than their impact. We want to say, well, at least Henry didn't murder anyone.
But the uncomfortable truth is that when you hold a position of influence, ignoring conflict to keep the peace is actually an act of harm.
Wow, yes.
If you manage a team and you refuse to discipline a toxic high performer because you want to avoid an uncomfortable conversation, you're failing the rest of your team.
You are Henry VI, weeping in your office while your best people get professionally assassinated by office politics.
Exactly. Now, we do have to be discerning about what we take from this ancient text and what we leave behind. Not everything translates.
Right. We don't need to adopt the aristocratic worldview, and we certainly need to leave behind the intense focus on the divine right of kings and the obsession with bloodlines.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in Act 2, the Duke of York sits down with Salisbury and Warwick in a garden, and he delivers this incredibly massive, dense, frankly, tedious monologue.
I know exactly the one you mean.
He traces his exact lineage all the way back to the third son of King Edward III, just to justify why his claim to the throne is superior to Henry's, who descends from the fourth son.
He goes through Lionel, Duke of Clarence, and Edmund Mortimer, and Philippa. I mean, it is like reading a biblical genealogy, but with a lot more swords and treason. It goes on forever.
It is exhausting. And for a modern listener, it is entirely irrelevant. We do not need to care about aristocratic bloodlines. That is the socio-political framework of Shakespeare's time, and we can safely leave it in the 15th century.
But the gold hidden in the dirt, the enduring wisdom we absolutely must keep, is the astonishingly accurate psychological insight into guilt and the reality of a corrupted conscience.
Shakespeare is an absolute master at showing the internal physiological toll of immoral actions.
Yes. Take Cardinal Beaufort, for example. He is one of the chief architects of Gloucester's murder.
And he wins. He eliminates his rival.
But he doesn't get to enjoy the victory?
No, he experiences a complete psychological collapse. Hazlitt actually calls Beaufort's deathbed scene one of the author's masterpieces.
It is so intense.
The cardinal is literally driven mad by guilt. He hallucinates Gloucester's ghost standing at his bed. He is yelling into the void, "Bring me unto my trial when you will. Died he not in his bed? Where should he die? Can I make men live, whether they will or no?"
It is the ultimate collapse of a guilty mind trying to rationalize a murder.
It really is. Beaufort offers the king the entire treasury of England if he will just let him live. But all the wealth in the world cannot buy off his conscience.
It is a profound visualization of how a corrupted soul destroys a person from the inside out, regardless of their status.
And in direct contrast to Beaufort's madness, we have King Henry offering a brilliant, enduring piece of wisdom.
This is one of my favorite parts of the play.
After Gloucester's death, when the king is being threatened and manipulated by Warwick and the other nobles, Henry suddenly finds this moment of intense moral clarity.
What does he say?
He says, "What stronger breastplate than a heart untainted? Thrice is he armed that hath his quarrel just, and he but naked, though locked up in steel, whose conscience with injustice is corrupted."
What stronger breastplate than a heart untainted? That is just beautiful.
It really is.
In a cutthroat world, whether it's a competitive corporate industry, high-stakes politics, or just the complexities of a difficult family dynamic, you can build all the alliances you want. You can amass all the wealth and skill you can find. But internal integrity is the only real armor you have.
Everything else can be stripped away in an instant.
That concept leads us right into a brilliant comparative insight that Hazlitt brings to the table. Hazlitt connects Henry VI to another of Shakespeare's failed monarchs, Richard II.
Yes, this is a fascinating comparison. By putting these two kings side by side, we get a complete picture of the two faces of ineffective leadership.
Let's explore that contrast because I think it is so relevant. Hazlitt argues that both of these kings lost their crowns due to mismanagement and imbecility, but they failed for completely opposite reasons.
Hazlitt points out that Richard II lost his crown through a thoughtless, willful abuse of power.
Richard was a voluptuary, right?
Yes, he was proud, revengeful, impatient of contradiction. He actively abused his authority to fund his luxury, seizing lands from his nobles to pay for his wars and his lavish lifestyle. He was an active agent of destruction.
And when Richard is finally deposed by Bolingbroke, he throws what is basically a highly poetic, exaggerated pity party.
He sits on the ground and gives these gorgeous, dramatic speeches.
Let's talk of graves, of worms, and epitaphs.
Right. He is incredibly dramatic about it because he loved the trappings of power. He loved the performance of being king. He loved being the center of attention.
Richard bewails the loss of power because it fed his massive ego. Now contrast that with Henry VI. Henry loses his crown out of pure, unadulterated indifference.
As Hazlitt notes, Henry's effeminacy is that of an indolent, good-natured mind. He is glad to be rid of the power with the trouble.
There is that famous moment in Act 4 where Henry, fleeing from the rebels, literally laments his own birth and wishes he was a commoner.
Right, he says, "Was ever king that joyed an earthly throne and could command no more content than I? Was never subject long to be a king as I do long and wish to be his subject."
It is a stunning admission of defeat. He doesn't want the responsibility.
He really doesn't.
So think about this in a modern context. If you had to work for one of them today, who is the worst boss? The arrogant, narcissistic micromanager like Richard II, who takes all the credit, abuses the staff, and spends the company budget on his own luxury.
Or the well-meaning absentee boss like Henry VI, who hides in his office, hates conflict, and lets the toxic middle managers run wild, destroying the company culture from the inside out.
It's a tough call.
The answer is that both extremes ultimately destroy the organization. They are the two faces of failed leadership.
Richard operates from toxic ego. He actively damages the people around him.
While Henry operates from toxic passivity, he allows the damage to happen.
True wisdom requires accepting the heavy burden of leadership. It requires wielding authority decisively and justly to protect the organization, but without letting that power corrupt your own character.
You cannot be Richard, but you also cannot afford to be Henry.
Exactly. And we don't just want to analyze literature here. We want to translate this insight into action for daily life. So we've pulled 3 specific practices from this text for you to apply.
Practice 1 is the Gloucester check.
Which is?
Look closely at your own workplace, your community, or your social circles. Are you participating, even passively, in the gossip and tearing down of someone who is highly competent, simply because their excellence makes others look bad?
That's a hard question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you allowing a manufactured Eleanor scandal to color your view of a Gloucester?
And on the flip side, if you are the Gloucester in your organization, if you are the one carrying the load with high integrity, are you naively assuming that your good work alone will protect you from office politics?
Because Gloucester thought the law and his innocence would save him, and he was dead wrong.
Integrity is absolutely vital, but so is situational awareness. You have to see the board, you have to know who the Suffolks and the Beauforts are in your organization, and you have to protect yourself accordingly.
Practice 2 is the Henry trap. This one requires deep self-honesty.
Okay, hit me with it.
Identify where in your life you are passively allowing chaos to unfold because you want to avoid conflict or because you want to keep your own hands clean.
What hard conversation are you avoiding right now under the guise of keeping the peace? Are you letting a toxic friend dominate the group? Are you letting a bad employee skate by while the rest of the team suffers?
Or are you failing to set a boundary with a family member because it just feels too confrontational?
Remember, Henry's tears didn't save anyone. Your passive empathy is not a substitute for corrective action.
Finally, practice 3 is the Cade manipulation. We live in an era of engineered outrage.
We really do.
When you feel intense anger about a societal, political, or workplace issue, pause and ask yourself a structural question. Who stands to profit from my anger?
Am I fighting a proxy war for a modern-day Duke of York? Is someone sitting in a corporate boardroom or a political office or a media conglomerate benefiting from the fact that I am enraged at my neighbor?
Guard your mind. Don't let your legitimate grievances be weaponized by people who view you as nothing more than a ragged multitude to be used and discarded.
Throughout this entire play, we see the stark contrast between the physical symbols of success and the internal reality of the human soul. King Henry had the crown. He had the ultimate symbol of earthly power.
But it was just a hollow ring of metal that brought him absolutely nothing but misery, fear, and grief.
Duke Humphrey of Gloucester, on the other hand, lost everything. He lost his wife, his power, his reputation, and his life. But he died with a heart untainted.
Which is the real victory.
In our modern pursuit of crowns, whether that crown is a C-suite job title, social media status, a specific income bracket, or a zip code, we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to turn our own lives and the lives of those around us into a chaotic bear garden just to get them?
When the curtain falls on your own story, will you prioritize the hollow crown or the untainted heart?
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.